Awesome. Hello. Welcome. Happy Friday. Thanks for joining us this morning, or well, I guess it's morning for me. Actually, no, it's afternoon. It's noon now, but it's morning if you're on Pacific time. Thanks for joining us in this hackathon series. I'm Kate. I am on the marketing team here at Bolt. This is Alex, Chief of Staff. With us today is Brian Whippo, Head of Developer Relations at Algorand Foundation, one of our sponsors for the hackathon here. Super excited to have this live stream. I feel like I'm going to learn a lot, but we're going to be talking about, Web3 for builders. That's right, Bo, let's go. We are at 110,000 registrations as of this morning. So for the hackathon, so I mean, just with this pace, we're just you guys are just blowing us out of the water here. We're going to have to do, more live streams. Next week is the last week for the build period. So we're going to have a lot of exciting things coming up. Make sure you stay tuned for that. Also wanted to just remind folks, we have tons of prizes, challenger prizes. You can get a prize for being the best meetup host. There's 25 prizes, 25 $1,000 prizes for the one shot prompt challenge. So, there's just a bajillion prizes. Go check them out. I will add the link right here. But yeah, let's get started.
Awesome. Thanks, Kate, for kicking us off. So today we have Brian here from the Algorand Foundation. Appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having
me. We're going to talk through how you can build a blockchain app using Bolt and the Algo chain. So excited to get into that topic. Before we go too deep, though, I think a good question for a lot of the folks asking who may not be super familiar with the Web3 space is, can you tell us a little bit about what Algorand is and where the Algorand Foundation fits into that picture?
Certainly. So Algorand is a blockchain. It was a single layer blockchain. If you know anything about blockchain, you may have heard of Bitcoin or Ethereum. Algorand is similar. It is a programmable blockchain like Ethereum, but works a little bit differently. It's very high performance. You can do many thousands of transactions per second. And it is essentially a shared ledger. So if you're not familiar with blockchain, right, you have accounts with balances and so forth, and this is public. And people can use the blockchain to essentially transact value or even just record data on this public ledger that the whole world can see. And it operates across many, many nodes or computers running around the world. So you essentially have, similar to what you would use in a traditional app, a database to hold information. This is like that, but distributed around the world. And you can do all sorts of different things with a blockchain. And I can elaborate a little bit on that later, because we have some pretty cool case studies of companies that have built really compelling businesses using public blockchain as technology infrastructure. So, Algorand Foundation. So I work for the foundation. We are the nonprofit entity that promotes the adoption of this blockchain, of the Algorand blockchain. So we are interested in growing the whole ecosystem of people who are using the chain, applications that are built upon it. Over time, they interact with each other, and you end up with this whole ecosystem of activity on the chain. And in my role as head of developer relations, I primarily help people technically build on the chain. So sometimes that's like hands-on engineering, and sort of at the other end of the spectrum, more marketing inspiration to get people excited about what they can do and to try this technology. So at the foundation, we are constantly working with everyone from student developers all the way up to enterprise businesses, significant businesses, and sometimes government entities to help them map real life problems onto the tools that blockchain affords to solve these problems when it makes sense to solve them with blockchain. And that's something that I can talk a little bit more about.
Okay, but here's the thing, Brian. I don't get it. Like, if I store information in a distributed database across many computers across the internet, then what if I just want to update the data and make an edit, and no one would know? How am I supposed to do that?
So the fact that this is public data and the blockchain ensures that you can only go forward, depending on the app, you may be able to sort of update the current version of data, but the history of what has occurred on the blockchain is immutable. It cannot be changed. And sometimes that's valuable. That's actually the point in some use cases. So it really depends what you're doing. And if you were using decentralized finance apps to trade, you might be updating your data by making a trade, and now you hold maybe a tokenized security or something like that. But in other cases, you may be permanently recording something that you want to be permanent, like you've earned a certification, and that knowledge can never be taken from you. So that data makes sense to be permanent. And in other cases, and I'll talk about this with one of the businesses we have on Algorand, it's actually really, really important that people cannot go back and alter data because it's kind of the point that it's unalterable.
Absolutely. So I think that's maybe when you're trying to break down a problem and figure out if it maps well to blockchain. I think that's kind of one aspect, right? If you want that data to be unchangeable and part of the public record forever, completely auditable, not just by you and your team, but by any user
Anyone.
of the app.
Right.
What are some other hints, or signals that you might look for that a particular problem might map well to a blockchain application?
Great question. So you've basically described the first of three categories where we think public blockchain is a really good solution lever for types of problems. So that first category is what we would call where you want data provenance, and you want to be able to verify that data is correct, and have anyone be able to go out and do that. And there's things like supply chain and even medical research use cases that leverage that capability. The second category of things the blockchain is really good for is disintermediation. Now, that's a big word. What is that supposed to mean? So, in many traditional markets, think about trading stocks, for example, there are brokers involved. It's an intermediary, right? A middleman, if you will, that has to be involved to enable you to trade, for example. And this is true in trading stocks. This is true in real estate. This is true in escrow transactions of any kind. But blockchain allows you to disintermediate and enable people to transact with each other directly, peer to peer, without that intermediary. And that can unlock some pretty interesting things like decentralized finance, where you can trade through an application, right? Just some code that's like running on the blockchain. And there's no middleman between you and the code that's allowing you to do that trade, or the ability to transfer an asset to another person directly, and just issue that transaction to them as an individual. No one else has to be involved. So that's two. The third thing that we like to say is really a great fit for blockchain is where you want to unlock access to some market, and public blockchain infrastructure can enable businesses, sometimes countries, sort of leapfrog traditional technology. So I'll give you an example. In Afghanistan, there's not a lot of traditional banking infrastructure there, right? It just doesn't exist. So those of us who are in the US, like we are, you take for granted that you can drive down the street and there's high quality banks and you can walk in, open an account, or withdraw your funds or whatever. That's not the case everywhere in the world. So in Afghanistan, blockchain is enabling payments through people's mobile phones and through like point of sale devices, the thing you tap your phone against in a store to buy things. And there's an app called Hesab Pay, and they're using blockchain as the underlying infrastructure to settle these payments by the millions. So a stat we like to say is 30% of electricity bills in Afghanistan are being paid on Hesab Pay. So now you have this payment capability, this whole network that in other countries you'd have to rely on traditional infrastructure, but public blockchain being there for anyone to use basically enables people in markets to access this capability to pay for things that we take for granted. So that's sort of like the third category of things. And of course, there's there's a lot of other novel and interesting use cases for blockchain. But those are sort of like the three main buckets.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I think for those traditional markets that have the intermediary, right? Whether that's real estate, I'll just use real estate as an example because I'm more familiar with that one than the inner workings of the stock market. But I believe it's pretty much the same concept. It's like you have to have an intermediary in the transaction because there's trust involved. You can't independently validate, for example, in the real estate market, it's very difficult to independently validate that the person you're buying the house from actually owns that house, because it's that record is literally like stored in some paper records
Right. In a
in
drawer in City Hall somewhere.
exactly. And then how do you even know that like the person you're looking at is really the person whose name is on that piece of paper? I mean, they have a driver's license, but that's just a piece of plastic that could be fake, literally, So it's like very difficult to actually just validate like chain of custody, like this person owned it. This is what they owned. Also, that's another piece of it, validating that the words on that piece of paper actually align with that physical property in the real world, and then managing that whole transfer process. There's like a lot of trust and investigation to the point where you actually have to pay for insurance during that
in case it goes
transaction
wrong.
in case the intermediary messes it up. So it's kind of, I think, interesting to see how that works, where with the going back to the publicly auditable and immutable nature of a blockchain, you eliminate all of those problems of the lack of clarity around what it is that you're moving and who owns it and the history and whether the person you're transacting with is actually the person that owns that thing. So, just looking at how that actually works in the real world today with major transactions versus the blockchain model, I think just for me adds a lot of clarity to kind of what the underlying challenges are that are being resolved by this sort of open information, distributed and unchangeable record of ownership.
Yeah. So one of the case studies that we love to talk about that touches on essentially all three of these categories of problems you can solve with blockchain is a real estate company called Lofty. And they basically tokenize a house, shares of a house, and then people can purchase these again without an intermediary, without a broker, and you can purchase a tiny fraction. So this is like opening up new markets that didn't exist before. You can buy $50 worth of a house instead of a whole house, or trying to like co-buy with one other person, which gets really complicated really quickly. But here you can buy like $100 worth of a house, get a couple of shares, and use their marketplace, and then you can manage it on chain and vote on decisions and things like this. And in the US real estate markets, the ownership records have to be public. So using a public blockchain actually solves a problem here rather than revealing some kind of private data. The ownership has to be discoverable. So it's a really nice fit for being able to tokenize, in this case, shares of an LLC that owns a house, and then you can transact them and have sort of like governance votes about how to manage that property all on chain.
Yeah. Super cool. Okay, so if this has caught your attention and you're thinking, my app could have some of these aspects integrated, and building something on the blockchain could be interested. Well, I have good news for you. You have an opportunity to win $25,000 by doing so. Brian, could you tell us a little bit more about the Algorand Challenge that we're running as part of the world's largest hackathon?
My pleasure. So we're excited to sponsor this special blockchain challenge within the context of the world's largest hackathon here. So the Algorand Foundation has a category, a special prize here for the best submission that meets this challenge. And so in addition to the sort of normal rules of the Bolt hackathon, we want to see what people can do with the Algorand blockchain. So, yep. So some not lucky, talented builder out there is going to prompt an app into existence in Bolt that takes advantage of the Algorand chain's transaction or public data capabilities, and we are looking for the best showcase of that. So it will be a beautiful application. It'll take advantage of all the capabilities of Bolt as an AI-powered app builder. And it will also showcase what can be done with Algorand. And so as the judge for this challenge, I'm not going to be hyper specific about what it is exactly that people need to do. There's a lot of ways that you could use a blockchain. You could be transacting in some way. Maybe you're tokenizing real estate. You could be analyzing data on the chain. You could be enabling AI agents to pay for things with stablecoins on blockchain, something like that. So it's sort of wide open for people to come up with incredible creative applications of this public database. And we'll be able to ascertain very easily if you've used the chain, right? Because it is a public blockchain, right? We can tell either on testnet or mainnet if you're really reading real data or sending real transactions. It's very easy for us to take a look at these. But I've already seen some builders out there doing some pretty cool stuff using Algorand. So I'm getting very excited to see these submissions for the Algorand Blockchain Challenge.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, a lot more details on exactly what you need to know for that challenge in the link that we put in chat here on YouTube. If you're on a different platform, I'd hop over to the YouTube chat and grab that link. Kate can share the YouTube link for some of you here in the other platforms chats. So speaking of challenges, before we jump into the details here on how to actually implement Algorand into your project, there's a few other $25,000 challenges available to you in the hackathon as well. Quite a number, in fact. But right now, I'm just going to mention 4 of our sponsors, specifically our gold tier sponsors, who we really appreciate their involvement in making this $1 million prize pool possible. So there's you think about building an app, right? And then what's the next thing that you need to do? Well, you might need to deploy that app. Okay, once it's done being built, that's where Netlify comes in. If you hit the deploy button in the upper right hand side of Bolt, that's going to deploy your app to Netlify, make it publicly accessible on the internet. And again, they are also having a $25,000 challenge. All the details can be found at hackathon.dev on the dev post page when you click register. Let's say you're making an integration with some third-party APIs and you want to keep your API key confidential. Supabase edge functions are critical. We've been talking about them on a lot of live streams. So that's the way to securely integrate with third-party APIs. So you're definitely going to want to check that out. Also integrated into the Bolt Builder. Now that you have an application, you've made some integrations, you've deployed the thing, maybe you want a domain. Well, Entry is giving you a free domain. So highly recommend that you check that out. The link to get your free domain will be right there in chat in Bolt after you deploy. You'll just need to make sure that you're registered for the hackathon and that you've used your Bolt promo code to upgrade to a paid plan, and you'll have that option right after deployment. And now, once you have your app out there public on the internet, you might want to actually make some money off your app, charge your users to use the app. And that's where RevenueCat comes in. They're the largest payment collector in the iOS store. And again, also running a challenge. So lots and lots of ways to win $25,000 from one of our awesome sponsors. But we really do appreciate them for helping make this whole thing possible and believing in the world's largest hackathon. So very exciting to see who's going to collect some of these prizes as we head into the final week here. Awesome. So let's do this, Brian. For the audience here that's looking for some tips and tricks and advice on how to integrate Algorand into their projects, take it away. Where should they start?
Sure. So I will share my screen. There are I want to cover a few things. So we'll talk a little bit more about inspiration. So I'll give you a short tour, and then we'll come to Bolt and show you what we've given builders as a jumping off point to create your app in Bolt. So earlier we were talking about what can you do with blockchain, and I'm on algorand.co. This link will be in the chat. This is our foundation landing page, Co for Community. And there's a bunch of information here that I would encourage folks to read about what's going on with blockchain. I appreciate that in the Gartner hype cycle, right? Maybe we're off the peak of the hype cycle for blockchain as a technology, but there's some incredible work going on in the background, somewhat quietly, as we work towards the plateau of productivity, as it is called. Now that AI is all the rage and has everybody's attention, but there's some really incredible work going on to build businesses and solutions like the ones we were just talking about. So lofty fractional ownership of homes and investment properties is an incredible demonstration of what you can do with Algorand. Folks Finance, this is a sort of a traditional DeFi suite of applications. So you can borrow and lend, you can trade through automated pools. It's a fully featured DeFi protocol like you might have seen on other chains. This goes straight to the heart of disintermediation and enables people to take sort of ownership of their investing. And then there's a couple other ones I'll mention quickly, because these are also really great showcases of public blockchain and putting data out there on a public blockchain for a good reason. So LabTrace is a really interesting case study, because I have to give you a little bit of context. In the medical research field, imagine you are a cancer researcher, you're developing a drug, and the drug is supposed to shrink tumors, right? So your patients come in for the trial, and they sit for an MRI to see how big their tumor is, and you take a picture of it over time every week, and the tumor should be shrinking. But if you are a dishonest researcher, you could take the series of images and just switch the order of them, and it would look like the tumor was shrinking when in fact it was growing. So these guys at LabTrace have built blockchain connectivity into the MRI machine hardware so that it records and timestamps these images publicly, so you can verify, and people reviewing research can verify that the images are in the right order, essentially, and everything is honest and above board. So that's a pretty incredible case where it actually doesn't take a lot of blockchain integration to do that. You just have to send a simple transaction with a little bit of information, but it enables people to then verify really, really important medical data and research and things like this. And then finally, I'll mention Whole Chain. Whole Chain is an example of supply chain traceability or transparency, where people want to know, and companies want to convey the journey of agricultural products from farm to table, from bean to cup, and so forth. And there's incredible work going on to record that data on chain, again using Algorand. So hopefully folks in the audience are feeling inspired. They've got some ideas flowing. Let's talk about how to put that into practice. So let's go over here.
I shared the Gartner hype cycle image in the chat too.
Oh, good.
If people aren't familiar with that, I think that's such a cool mental model. And I think about that a lot. Just once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah, it really is a really helpful mental model when you think about technology and news coverage and what are people talking about and thinking about. So right now we are in the AI hype cycle, perhaps the hypest of all hype cycles that we've seen.
Speaking of hype, the YouTube channel is at 14.9K subscribers. If everybody watching just goes and subscribes, we will pass the 15K mark.
Click that subscribe button. Good stuff.
And yes, Ray, we are taking questions, but we will only respond to your question if you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just kidding. We'll probably answer it anyways, but it'd be awesome if you did subscribe, push us over that 15K mark.
Cool. All right, so let's get into Bolt, get our hands dirty a little bit here. So what we have done at the Algorand Foundation and my DevRel team is we've created a starting point for people. So I want to get a couple of things out of the way. We appreciate that using blockchain technology can be challenging. It's like a whole nother programming paradigm on top of normal application building. So it's not easy to learn or to implement. And some of the technologies that we've got and the libraries that make all of this work are pretty new. And that means a lot of AI models don't even know about this stuff yet based on the training data they had maybe just a few months ago. So we appreciate this and we want to set people up for success. So we've created a starter. And this is basically a minimal application that is available through a link. It's basically bolt.new/GitHub, and then it uses a GitHub repository that we created, so algorand-devrel/algorand-bolt, and that will get you here. So if you just go to that URL, let it spin up, and you will start at this React app starter that we put together, and it's got a few things built in here that I want to go through. So, the blinking cursor problem is real. So we didn't want people to start from scratch. So what you've got here is a small app, and I'm just going to go from top to bottom. So up at the top is where the real action has happened. This connect wallet button is essentially the portal to the Algorand blockchain. So on blockchain, if you want to hold a token or the native asset of a chain, you generally do that through a wallet, like a mobile app on your phone. And we have a library that basically handles all this and sort of abstracts away a bunch of complexity under the hood and gives you a very simple connect wallet button. And we have an array of wallets that are available in the Algorand ecosystem, starting with Para, which is an incredible sort of individual user wallet with excellent user experience, and we highly recommend that people try that out. And you can also use the Wallet Connect protocol if you may have another crypto wallet that supports Algorand. That's sort of your gateway to a number of other wallets as well. So this button already being integrated here essentially gets you started connecting to the Algorand blockchain with all the latest code under the hood. And I'll show you a little bit later some of the integration that enables. And we have an example as well to show of an app that's had a few things added to it already to visualize, like, what are we talking about when we're talking about blockchain accounts and data and things like this. But hold that thought. So moving right along, there's a bunch of resources in here. So when you come to this app, the landing page has a whole bunch of links in here because, again, we don't want you to stare at a blank screen and feel lost. So we have a bunch of learning resources. We have an entire portal of technical docs and examples and so forth. In the learning resources section here, we have a gallery of examples for essentially starter apps and things so that you can play around and see how this stuff works if you want to get into the code. If you want to learn more about how to use AlgoKit, which is our toolkit for building on Algorand, we've got a small tutorial that you can cut your teeth on. And then the ARC standards, like this starts to get pretty technical, but these are essentially technical standards that the community has coalesced around for how to use Algorand technology to solve different kinds of problems. If you're a dev, these are essentially the core tools that you will want to use. We have a bunch of stuff within AlgoKit. It's a whole collection of things so that you can build your app from beginning to end. Lots of batteries included there. We have Laura, a block explorer. So if you're ever looked at Bitcoin Block Explorer or Etherscan or anything like that, this is like that. This is a free tool that we create at the foundation so you can view blockchain data and interact with it in various ways. And then there's some code libraries here as well. This app that you're looking at already has all this built in, right? So we wanted to give people a nice trampoline to jump off of here to get started. Just moving around clockwise, there's a couple of different ways you can program transactions on the blockchain. And I want to spend just a moment here. One of the cool things we've done at Algorand Foundation is we appreciate that developing apps that use blockchain has been challenging historically, and you have to learn special purpose languages to do this. So we created a way to write smart contracts, as they're called. These are little applications that run on the blockchain in real Python or real TypeScript. So it becomes much, much easier to write those apps, and also for large language models, right? AI bots to write these apps because they're written in normal and very common programming languages. And all the resources related to those are here. In Bolt, you'll want to use TypeScript because the front end is all going to be in JavaScript, and that's sort of like the nearest neighbor to the language used to build the rest of the app. And then finally, here we have a link to our Discord. So this is the Algorand Foundation's Discord. We have a whole community of people that technical and non-technical that are talking about Algorand, building stuff on Algorand, helping each other. There's a special Bolt Hackathon channel in there. Come on in, introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what you're building. We know you may want to keep your ideas a secret in the spirit of a competitive competition, but don't be shy. And if you need code help, and this is a really important point, don't hesitate to pop in and ask. We know this stuff is complicated and sometimes it doesn't work. Pop on in. We've got a dev help channel, or you can just ask in the Bolt Hackathon channel. And there are community members and folks from my DevRel team who are there answering questions and helping people get unstuck on various things. So don't be shy. And then moving right along, we have also provided some prompts. So when you start in Bolt, you have a couple of modes. So down here on the left, you can see this button right here that allows you to toggle between discussion and build mode. So we actually created some prompts to set people up for success here. The first prompt is essentially a discussion mode prompt to get the AI in the right headspace, essentially, and provide some pointers for the underlying code libraries that should be used. If you don't know what this means, like, that's okay. This is meant to maximize the chances of success for prompting an app into existence. And below that, we've also given you a couple of common use case prompts that you could put into build mode and get Bolt started creating something for you. And then at the bottom, so there's a little bit of a tip / disclaimer. So Bolt is a tool that runs in the browser. And for some things that you might encounter in the course of developing a blockchain app, you're going to need some tools that don't run in the browser. So this is a workaround, essentially, that you can use. If you get to this point, our recommendation is essentially use Bolt to build the application. And if you need to go down the path of creating a smart contract and doing a bunch of testing and things like that, you'll probably want to do those parts using AlgoKit, our builder toolkit, separately. And so this is sort of attempting to keep people from spinning the wheels too much within Bolt, because there will be a point where you might have to like eject out and do a couple of things and then merge it back in. So if you're building, avail yourself of these prompts and resources, and don't hesitate to ask questions if you have any questions at all. So I'm going to see this in action. So I have a... Go ahead. What were you saying, Alex?
I was just saying, let's do it. I want to see it in action.
All right. So I'm going to share this tab instead. So here we have an app with some stuff happening. So you'll notice that it looks essentially the same as the other one did, but there's some more content in here. And I've actually already connected my Para wallet, and the button using a library called Use Wallet has connected over the internet to my Para wallet. It's got an account. This is on testnet. This is not real money. and that's how we've set it up by default so that you can play around. And there's 1,000 algo in this account, and that enables the rest of the app to use the account that's been connected there to show other data. So you can see the balances here. So this is actually reading the balance of that account from the blockchain. In this case, it is using an API provider called Nodely. So I want to give Nodely a quick plug here. They are an excellent API service for the Algorand blockchain. And as part of the Bolt hackathon, they have very generously given, as part of the Bolt Builder Pack, 2 months of unlimited service through their essentially global network of nodes. And this is worth over $500. So Nodely has taken the cap off completely. And if you want to build an app that might be very demanding of querying data from the blockchain, sending transactions rapidly, something like that, you are completely unlimited during this hackathon because you'll have 2 months of free service. So thank you, Nodely. We appreciate that. And then I have already prompted a few things into this app. A little bit of data about the network. This is the block number of testnet right now. Yeah, Nodely. And it also has some, I'll call them widgets down below that are showing more information about what's in the account. So we've created like an asset portfolio view here, and even a transaction history. So under the hood, there's a lot going on to provide this transaction history, and essentially Nodely's infrastructure combined with what we've prompted into the app through Bolt is searching historical transactions. Some of these go back, like years in my particular testing account. And you can see some examples of like real transactions on testnet here. That this is literally just me building stuff and messing around on testnet. But this is what stuff could look like in a production app, where you've got, in this case, like, quote unquote, buys and sells, sends and receives, and it's displaying account numbers, the block that transactions occurred in, and you can expand these, and there's even more information. So you can see the transaction ID. This is like the unique identifier for anything that occurs on a blockchain, with a link out, and so you can start to see that this is resembling like a real blockchain enabled application. And this was just prompted into existence, as I like to say, on top of this starter template that we've provided. So hopefully, if you are curious about using Algorand and you want sort of the quickest way to get started, you can use this template and then prompt from there. And of course, I left all the other resources in the landing page here, but of course you can rip all of that out and renovate the house if you want.
Very, very cool. I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat.
Hit me.
Should we jump into them? Let's do it. Okay, so I think we already addressed this one. So best place to find the step-by-step prompts is in this starter kit link to the starter project that Kate has been sharing in the chat. It'll also be in the YouTube video description, so you'll be able to find that there. Really appreciate Brian putting that together, as I know a starter template and starter prompts are super, super helpful.
Yeah.
Got a question from live stream regular Yerba here on blockchain to post static stats.
Yeah, you could post whatever you want, quite literally. There are a couple of different approaches to using blockchain. One would be to have the current state of something represented on the chain, and you can write data to an application on the chain, and it's available on any of the nodes, and that can be updated as needed. And then whatever those stats are, whatever that data is, can be read at any point. Another way to post things on the chain would be to put them in a transaction. So the transactions over time will be recorded in the history of the chain. Transactions are not part of the current state of the chain, just like account balances and things, and data are part of the current state. But if you wanted to post stats that are sort of like anchored in time, you could also just post them through a transaction. And whatever that data is will always be retrievable from the archive of historical transactions on the chain. So yes, of course, is the short answer to that question. But sort of the corollary to that is if you have dynamic stats where they are changing over time, there's also ways to do that. We call these boxes, and it's essentially just like a key value store that you would see in other app contexts, but on blockchain, and it would be available when you query a node for the current state of your app.
Very cool. Let's see here. I think you talked about some of the cool examples.
Mm.
So I think there's probably, multiple correct answers to this question, but curious if you have a personal kind of dream app that you're hoping someone builds or favorite app that
Yeah.
you've seen.
That's an excellent question. So I'll break this down. So the dream behind Algorand was to use some jargon to solve the blockchain trilemma. And I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole on what that means, but blockchains have historically had to make sacrifices to and or were never like fully fit for purpose to power businesses and apps like people are used to using on their phone. And Algorand was created specifically to provide blockchain infrastructure that didn't have major compromises. So it is extremely fast. It supports 10,000 transactions a second. It's extremely cheap to use. And you have the benefit of all kinds of capabilities that are like first class speed and reliability. It's never gone down and so forth. So in a nutshell, right, to put it in non-technical terms, Algorand is supposed to be a blockchain that just works and doesn't have shortcomings that many other chains do in various ways. One of the ways, and I'm going to segue into the second part of the question here, that Algorand is different than other blockchains is we have something we call instant finality. And so I think the perfect customer for us, or perfect use case, is probably payments related, and that could involve um, tokenized assets, real world assets, investment securities, things like this, and of course, trading these things is going to involve payments as well. But instant finality and some other capabilities we have allows transactions on Algorand to be permanently and irreversibly confirmed as soon as they are in a block. There's no way that they can be rolled back or you find out later that it wasn't confirmed, and that's a problem on a lot of other blockchains. As it turns out, it may look like your transaction is final but actually hasn't settled yet, or you have to like wait for more blocks to know that transaction is settled. And if you've ever used some of the earlier blockchains, you might have to wait quite a long time for your transaction to be confirmed. And so Algorand's ability to create a block every 2.7-ish seconds and have any transaction included be immediately settled, right, instantly final, is the perfect capability for payments, because then you have no doubt as an individual user or as a business, like a risk manager in a large business, that those payments have gone through. And so we love payments related use cases on our blockchain. And most of the time, when people try it for the first time, or maybe they've had previous blockchain experience and they try Algorand, they're like, wow, this is amazing. It just works. And all these headaches I used to have to worry about with other chains, I don't have to. So at the very beginning, I mentioned that Hisab Pay app that many people are using day to day in Afghanistan. Like, that's pretty cool, right? You have uh, public blockchain infrastructure powering everyday, like running errands and paying electricity bills at scale, and it all runs and just hums along nicely on Algorand, because it's never gone down and transactions are immediately settled. So that's sort of my view. I would say, however, as a forward-looking challenge to the builder community, we think that a new frontier of payments exists at the intersection with AI, right? Historically, businesses have bought and sold things, and individuals can use their credit cards to buy and sell things. But we are now in a world just recently where autonomous AI powered agents can go and do things for you. They can like book you a vacation, go shopping, and AI agents are going to need a way to pay for things. But if you're using traditional payment capabilities or maybe some other blockchain, it takes a long time to settle payments, and that doesn't really work in a highly automated case where an AI agent might be like paying another agent. You need that settlement to go through now, right? So we would love to be the blockchain that powers AI agent commerce, essentially, and that is a challenge I would issue to all of the builders out there to say, if you're building something where an AI is doing something for a user, ask yourself, how could it pay for things? And I would say the answer is you should probably pay for it using stable coins on Algorand.
That's awesome. I love this.
Running around broke.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically.
Well said. Well said. Speaking of payments and transactions, another live stream regular, El Haidi asks, how does Algorand make money?
Good question. So I mentioned at the outset, and you guys mentioned as well, that we are a foundation. So it might be a little bit of a different type of entity than the other sponsors who are for-profit businesses. We're a nonprofit foundation, and we have a treasury that was generated when the original Algo token was sold at the origins of the blockchain over 6 years ago. And so we use that to operate over many years to promote the blockchain. I'm not selling you anything directly, right? The foundation is not asking you to like sign up or subscribe or anything like that. The difference, however, is with a public blockchain, transactions have fees. Algorand's are very, very cheap. So it's 0.001 algo, and algo is like less than 20 cents at a moment. So we're talking about sub-penny fees to transact on the blockchain. So it's like orders of magnitude cheaper than any other traditional transaction infrastructure that you could use. And at scale, the network is sustained by those fees. And I think we're over 3 billion transactions now on Algorand over the past 6 years. Yesterday actually was the 6th birthday of our mainnet. So
That's awesome. Yeah, especially when you think about, as just a user of financial network technology, every time you swipe your credit card, there's like a 3% transaction. That is not pennies. That is often dollars or tens of dollars.
Right. You are 100% right there. And you may not notice it, but the merchant you're purchasing from is paying those fees, and they have just increased their prices by 2.75% or whatever it is to cover that. So it's all invisibly baked into the price of the goods that you buy every day, but it's there.
100%.
Thank you. Happy birthday, Algorand.
Okay, let's see. This is kind of heavily related. Agentic Systems. I think that's kind of exactly what you're talking about here, right? Not only can it facilitate transactions, but it can also deal with that provenance issue and make sure that the agentic system in question is who it says it is.
Oh yeah. So like this is a how question, and this is not a trivial problem to solve, but a lot of the pieces are there. So we talked about the ability to essentially interact with other users across the blockchain, and because people sign cryptographically transactions or data when they interact with the blockchain, that the holder of the keys for that account has actually signed, and that can be applied to these data provenance problems as well. Now, I will say, if you want to, I'm going to use the example of a photographer. So maybe they're like a wildlife photographer and they want to prove that their photographs are their own and not AI generated. They can sign those photographs, but just keep in mind that the whole sort of supply chain of a photograph starts in the camera hardware. And there are some camera manufacturers that are starting to build this capability into their chips so that when you take a photograph, it is actually signed at the moment it is created by the camera. And then what you could do is, follow that signature through. And if you use a public blockchain like Algorand to record, let's say I'm a photographer and I've taken these photos and submitted them to these contests, or sold them to magazines, et cetera, you would be able to use the public nature and the immutable nature of blockchain to let other people verify that you actually signed your photographs. So that's sort of like the human angle on content provenance. You could also do something similar with AI if you wanted to have AI generated content be immutably recorded. But I've read a little bit about this. I'm not an expert in this domain, but there's a lot of complexity when editing gets involved, right? Do these photographs or videos or whatever change in such a way that you like lose track? It's quite complicated, but we have seen some folks that are doing very interesting work to be able to follow, like, from the camera all the way through to maybe the photograph appearing on a news site, and make that data trail publicly verifiable, so that if somebody snaps a photo, it's real and it's not just AI misinformation.
Let's see here. We've got okay. We have like 10 more comments and 9 more minutes. So
All right, lightning round.
let's lightning around through some of these here. So Unity SDK. This is well above my technical level here. Thoughts, Brian?
Yeah, there is one. It is community maintained. So we have SDKs for a number of programming languages that either Algorand Technologies, which is another entity, or Algorand Foundation have created. This particular one has been updated relatively recently, end of last year, by a community member, but we do have a Unity SDK. So if you want to build a game with Unity and include Algorand blockchain transactions or asset creation, tokenize game items, you can do that, and people have done that.
Awesome. Oh, here's the easy one. The only people you need to get to test your app is the judges. And they will do that whether you want them to or not. So, yes, very easy one there. Here's a question about Web3 games.
So, at the moment, so the incentives question is a tricky one. The foundation does offer essentially startup accelerator and incubator programs, and if you go to algorand.co and go under, I think it's the entrepreneurs section, we have a number of programs that can help people along. That includes games. We've seen some really cool Web3 games built on Algorand. And you'll want to reach out to us and let us know what you're building if you're looking for like special incentives or assistance there. And another department of the foundation specializes in helping people essentially build businesses that run on blockchain. And then my specialty is helping them get the technology working. But yes, there are pretty cool games on Algorand. And the one notable thing that I haven't really talked a lot about is when you create a token on Algorand, such as a game item, or it could be like a bond or a stock, you can use what we call an Algorand standard asset. And it's just this really simple mechanism to create a token. You give it a few data points and just send a transaction to create it. You don't have to use smart contracts to create tokens like you do on Ethereum or other EVM networks. So we have this like built-in capability in the Algorand protocol that makes it like 10 times easier to create any kind of asset. And that works really well for game items.
Awesome. EVM compatibility.
No, we use the Algorand virtual machine, the AVM for short. So if you are familiar with the EVM, you may have smart contracts or assets on EVM. They are not directly compatible with Algorand. If you want to translate that or port that to Algorand, let us know. Reach out in Discord. Many people have taken that path. And famously, there is a payments company in Denmark that was building their business on EVM, and they actually changed, and they rebuilt it all on Algorand and found that it was like 7 times easier. Like they literally kept track of how much they were paying the developers, and it was like 1/7 of what it took to build their business on Algorand instead of on Ethereum. And they wrote a whole case study. So they're called Comply Pay. And so they have this incredible story about just how much easier it was to solve problems on Algorand rather than EVM. So come on in, give it a try. The water's nice, and we think you'll like it.
Very nice. Question on, I think you've addressed this, but smart contracts using TypeScript.
Yes. So Algorand TypeScript is essentially a subset of semantically and syntactically correct TypeScript, but it's a framework that lets you write smart contracts using that language. And then under the hood, we have a compiler that takes what you've written in TypeScript and turns it into the machine code that runs on the blockchain, but it abstracts all of that complexity away from you. So far as I know, we are the first blockchain to offer smart contract authoring in both real TypeScript and real Python. So no special purpose language is required.
Awesome. Well, Battle Juice.
It is crazy. Yeah, the guys who built this compiler, I mean, so much credit to the engineers. It is pretty cool. And when I go to conferences and stuff and I tell people, you don't have to learn Solidity or Rust, they're like, oh, thank God.
I'm guessing the answer to this is just the same with any other crypto coins, where you got to go to an exchange and exchange them for dollars.
Or an off-ramp, exactly. So there are, I think the top 20 exchanges in the world support Algo. Some of those support the USDC, so Circle's USD stablecoin on Algorand, Coinbase perhaps being the largest. And centralized exchanges or on off-ramp providers would be the route to convert stablecoins to fiat currency if your app requires it.
Ray has an interesting app idea here.
Yes, is the short answer. Yeah, so it was a bit of a crypto buzzword, but this concept of a DAO or any kind of like voting organization can be implemented on blockchain. If you give people an account and you know who they are, or they are voting based on some stake, like a quantity of token they own or something like that, you can absolutely administrate those voting systems on chain. There are public ways to do that. There are also private ways to do that that involve encryption. That's a little bit more complicated, but this is actually a great use for blockchain. And one of the use cases that I mentioned earlier, Lofty, is essentially doing this, where the shareholders of the DAO, right, the LLC, it's literally like a U.S. state LLC that owns the house, vote to manage it, and they use like a Discord channel to communicate about the questions that they're voting on and so forth. So take a look at what Lofty's doing for on-chain voting. Would probably be a good place to look.
Awesome, and we've arrived at our final question.
Ooh, passkeys. So we are working on something called Liquid Auth, actually, that allows you to use a passkey to create a crypto account and sign transactions. And we have some of this groundwork done already. But yes, it is possible to do this through the cryptographic standards. And if you have any device, a phone or otherwise, that supports passkeys, you could use that to generate an Algorand account that corresponds to that passkey and then sign transactions with your fingerprint or your face.
Very cool. Awesome. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. We did pass 15,000 subscribers moments ago, so appreciate that. More importantly, though, appreciate you joining us,
My pleasure.
Brian, and the doing the rapid round here, getting everyone's questions answered. Anything else you'd like to leave the audience with as we wrap this up?
In closing, I'm really excited to see what you build. I can't wait really to see these submissions. AI has enabled people to build incredible stuff, and you don't even have to be a developer anymore because it is so good. And finally, don't hesitate to ask for help. I know everybody wants to be secretive because it's a competition, but if you ask a question in our Discord to get unstuck, no one is going to leapfrog you in the competition. So come say hello in our Discord and we'll help you out.
Awesome. And I just want to say we have the Hackathon News Network live starting in like half hour. I'm going to put the link in the chat here for all of our events. We have a bunch of events, like I said, next week. Next week, our live streams are going to be about polishing it up, getting it ready to submit. And I will add our events link here. Like I said, stay tuned for next week because we have some awesome things planned.
Amazing. 10 days left. You got plenty of time. Go, go, go.
Plenty of time. Plenty of time. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. And this will be recorded and added to our YouTube as well. So check that out also. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Happy weekend.